So welcome everyone to another Spiritual Science as Social Activism and Self-Initiation evening here in the Loft. And here we have our third talk on Kundalini. And no worries for you that are here that we're not at the first two installments. Kundalini is kind of like that. It just gets activated and it keeps going and going. I didn't know where to stop. I mean, I had 30 pages of notes. Don't worry, I'm not going to go 30 pages of notes if you're here this evening. I've cut it down to about 25 or... oh no, 15. There we are. 15 pages. There's just so much on this subject that once you get into it, especially coming not only from the classic perspective, the yogic, tantric perspective, but when you start to open it up from different perspectives, such as the spiritual science background and some of the Western esoteric viewpoints, one sees a whole lot more around this mysterious subject. So I've been very thankful the last couple of years doing a program called Jewel in the Lotus, which is now incorporated in the spiritual boot camp that I've been running, and there's a number of people here that are involved in the spiritual boot camp. This Jewel in the Lotus program is a systematic preparation and cultivation of the subtle bodies, the subtle energies, an awakening of the awareness, so that you are the one that's directing these energies. You're the one that has your foot on the gas pedal and a foot on the brake. And it's through that training that I've come back to realize how important it is really for anyone who wants to participate in evolution to work consciously with Kundalini. And that's why the first talk was called Kundalini, the true evolutionary force. That it is really that primeval force, impulse that has been there from the beginning, moving evolution forward. And now as we awaken, as a humanity, we need to participate as a partner with that force. And in the second talk, which was entitled Kundalini, the will of the universe, that it is actually the willpower of the universe that we can gear into to move ourselves forward in our personal and planetary evolution. And so tonight's talk, installment 3, and I'm going to try so hard. Yeah, there's not going to be a part 4. I can't do a part 4. Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know. I mean, how much can you milk Kundalini? And it's not even that. It's like, because in 2 weeks, I'm dying to do a talk I've been promising to do since September called Your Personality, the Root of All Evil. Working with the temperaments and how to transform temperaments and understand the temperaments of human beings. And then 2 weeks after that, I'm doing one on bees and biodynamic agriculture. Very excited about that. And then 2 weeks after that, I'll be doing another talk with, pardon me?
Oh, it's all the buzz.
It's all the buzz. Yep. Well, there are forces out there that are doing their darndest to be buzz kills.
Yes.
Bringing the bees down. So we'll talk about that too. What's going on in that world and how we can counter that through things like biodynamic agriculture, which is a spiritual form of farming. And then 2 weeks after that will be the last talk of the season until the fall, and I'll be sharing that with Andrew Camargo, bringing him back, and yes, looking into more deep esoteric stuff. So, but for tonight, let's go back to the beginning, where I began in the first talk, speaking of the beginning of the universe, as it's described by science as the Big Bang. And I talked about the Big Bang, and I don't want to just be clear that I'm not necessarily a believer or an exponent of the Big Bang theory. And in fact, there's a lot of debate still in the scientific realm, and a lot of scientists that don't really buy into this idea that everything started at this minute pinpoint of energy that exploded millions of years ago and has created this expanding universe that one day is going to run out of steam, and then it's going to implode and collapse in upon all of us and all life. I kind of prefer the more ancient wisdom that speaks of the big Om. Yes, big Om is the creative force that, if you think about it, if you look at that sound Om, encompasses both expansion and contraction. When you do the sound Om, there's this Om. The mouth opens and expands, and then this brings it back into this counter force. It's going out and it's coming back. So it's kind of complementary to the Big Bang idea of expansion and contraction being the two fundamental polarities in the universe. Let's do that. Let's just experience that Om. It's kind of a nice way to settle in. Just nice, gentle, sensing the expansion and then the counter force of contraction. A nice deep breath. Well, let's talk about money. Let's talk about money for a moment. How do I switch from Kundalini to money? Well, there's similarities. Because money's no good unless it's being spent. Right? You know, if you have money just sitting around in your pocket or in your drawer, it's really of no value. It's just paper. It's just printing on paper. But when it's spent, it's got power. Or if I said, I've got some money here, I'm going to give it to you if you can do X, Y, Z, we'd see you, come into action. So unless money is being utilized in some way, it's really of no value. And similar with Kundalini. Kundalini, it's there dormant, waiting to be utilized. And both money and Kundalini are really invisible. You could say they're just a concept. Like even the money that's in your bank account, it's really just a concept. It's really just numbers in a computer somewhere. And even when you go to borrow money, the bank is lending you money that doesn't even exist. It's like virtually non-existent. Similar to Kundalini, it's imperceptible. It's imperceptible in your being until you realize it's there and you decide to spend it. So I like to think of Kundalini as like money in the bank. You all have this money in the bank. It's the will of the universe. You guys are not millionaires, billionaires, trillionaires. You are willionaires.
You're richer than you think.
That's right. You've got the will of the universe in you, so you're a willionaire. I'm going to talk about the ethers. Anybody here heard of the ethers before? Ethers? You've heard of ether this or ether that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the ether is not something that many people know about. But again, we're looking into something that's been kept kind of as hidden knowledge, secret, esoteric knowledge through the centuries. But it is a rather important concept to understand around what Kundalini is all about. So, when it comes to ether, to understand this, of course, all quests for truth and knowledge begin with Wikipedia. Turn to Wikipedia, and the origin of ether is a Greek word, ether, which means pure or fresh air or blue sky, clear sky. And in Greek mythology, the ethers were thought of the essence that the gods breathed. They breathed ether while we mortals breathed air. And in Greek mythology, there was a character known as Ether. He was the son of Erebus and Nyx. he represented this quality of pure, fresh, clear sky. Now, in terms of the science behind ether, does this actually exist? Well, up until recently, it was considered a valid scientific idea that there was this thing known as ether, or the quintessence, also referred to as the quintessence, that filled the region of the universe, filled all the universe above the terrestrial realm. So anything that wasn't physical was of the ethers. You could actually think of it as the counter space to physical space. In fact, I've been reading this fascinating study called Physical and Ethereal Spaces. So you have physical space, and anything that's not physical is considered composed of the ethers. It's the counter space to physical space. So this room, this what we would think of as empty space, is actually filled with the ethers. And this was the belief even among scientists in the ancient perspective, right up through into the late 19th century, where physicists believed that ether permeated all throughout space, providing a medium which light could travel in a vacuum. But then we got into the 20th century, where, of course, science was really wanting to quantify and prove the existence of everything. And through their experiments, they could not prove that ether existed. So that's been kind of crossed off the list of things in the scientific model. But I say bah, humbug to that aspect of science. That, in fact, just because you cannot prove it with Western quantification doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Same with Kundalini itself. Just because you can't measure it, you can't put it in your hands, doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. We can still experience it. Ether was considered the fifth element. What are the other four elements?
Wind.
Earth.
Wind, water, fire.
Right, yes. We've got the four elements that compose everything within our realm. We've got solids, earth. We've got liquids, the water you're drinking. We've got gases, the things in the air. And then we've got fire, or sources of warmth, thermal forces. And ether was considered the fifth element. That was considered, that was the way it was viewed in the classic ancient scientists, the alchemical sciences. There was this quintessence. And in fact, the chant, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, anyone ever chanted that, familiar with that? Is made up of the 6 syllables, Om being the universal sound, and then Na refers to the earth element, Ma refers to the water element, Shi refers to the fire element, Va refers to the air element, and Ya refers to the ether, to this quintessence. Mm-hmm. So let's invoke that a little bit. Let's just do a nice gentle chanting of the Om Namah Shivaya. So you might find that evoking of the ether through the chanting. And interestingly, it's actually the larynx chakra that corresponds to this fifth element of ether. We have the first chakra, corresponds to the earth, the second to water, the third to fire, the heart realm to air, and the larynx pertains to this fifth element, the ether. And so singing, using the voice, is particularly evocative of this element, this fifth element. Now in terms of that ether, just to note that there's actually four kinds of ether. There's what's known as the warmth ether, the life ether, the light ether, and the chemical, or sometimes called the tone ether. And this is a big, deep kind of off the charts esoteric subject. I'm not going to go into this in any depth talking about the ethers, but as we move forward, we'll see that an understanding of the ethers is quite central to the future, our future work. Another example of ether is sometimes after I have gatherings here, a lot of people are discharging etheric forces, and I'll go out for a while and I come back and it's like hitting a wall. You walk and it's thick, you could cut it with a knife. That's the ether has densified because of all the people exuding etheric forces into the room. So that's one of the things I deal with in keeping this space. It's not just about vacuuming carpets and wiping the counters with vinegar, although that helps, but I have to manage the ethers of this room. So smudging is a traditional way of purifying the ether. Sound, so bring in a singing bowl. The Tibetan Buddhists, they clap hands to cleanse the ether. Some people will beat walls with a towel. I even have a laser light. I have this laser light of a particular color that will cut through etheric goo and knock it down. And in fact, vacuuming is not a bad way to move the ethers. I know it sounds kind of weird, but I learned this when I was in the Clairvision school of meditation, where there was a lot of meditating in groups, and people exuding ethers, that using a vacuum in the meditation room, the turbine of the vacuum would actually move air and move the ether, and you'd see people walking around the vacuum about 3 feet off the ground to move the air, because the air, is one of the elements, just as fire and any of the elements can be used to affect the ether. But moving air with the vacuum actually is a way to stir up the ether and let it just be broken up and recycled. So, and I keep a bowl of salt water here, because salt water, and the water for one thing, will absorb ether, and the salt will neutralize it. Salt has that very potent power. So these are great things to know in managing the ether, because when you're activating Kundalini, you're going to be moving the ethers. But I will make a side note here that these tips like smudging and singing bowls are great for some things, but they shouldn't be overvalued for dealing with certain other things, like the nastier stuff. You don't necessarily get rid of the nasty, heavy spiritual opposition by burning incense or things like that. That takes bigger power, bigger will.
The willionaire.
Yes, awakening the willionaire inside.
I just have a question.
Yes.
Where do you feel the ethers? Like, is there a particular chakra that you feel ethers? Like, would it be in your throat? Do you feel it in your chest? Like, when you walk into a room and it feels as thick as cheese or whatever you said.
I feel the ethers with my etheric body. People familiar with this? The caduceus is a symbol that's been around really thousands of years. They trace it back like 4000 BC, coming out of the Sumerian and Mesopotamian cultures. And we've got two serpents going up a pole and something winged at the top. So there we're back to kind of the idea of the tetramorph, right? This image that encompasses several different types of creatures to give expression to a metamorphosis of some kind. And sometimes this is confused with another image, the rod of Asclepius, which is a Roman image. Asclepius was a Roman god of healing, and he walked around with a staff that has a snake on it. And that's often confused with the caduceus, which is comes from a different source. And the caduceus isn't so much about healing, although it is used in the medical world as a symbol of healing, kind of erroneously, because it's not about healing. It's actually about metamorphosis. It's about going from what you might say the lowest state of being, a snake, that is on the horizontal. Snake is pretty much horizontal, as are all animals, actually. Although when a snake gets riled up, it does go into the vertical. It's interesting, it can rise up, but it's predominantly on horizontal. You don't see snakes in the vertical, although they can climb trees. They could actually wind their way up a tree. It's like this wanting to come into verticality. And then up into something that's winged, which one could consider the new nature, the higher nature that we aspire towards. This rising up of warm-blooded mammals became the form and function into which the human as a spiritual being could descend into. And the blood is actually what we exist in. We exist in our blood as an egoic being of selfhood. I know that might sound very strange, but it is blood that is the vehicle of yourself, the warmth of the blood. And so animals had to go through this amazing trajectory of evolution to rise up in form and function and warmth to allow the human as a spiritual being to descend into this as a vessel. Air is the vehicle of the astral body. Liquids is the vehicle of the etheric body, all within the mineral body. And so blood, which is, it's got gas and liquid, right? But it's got warmth. It's that warmth in the blood that is the vehicle of the egoic self. I know this is a bit advanced and heavy esoteric stuff, but it all comes together. It's all really important information, and I've spent, much of my life contemplating and studying this stuff, and maybe you'll be inspired to do the same, because it does give you a greater measure of consciousness and control, or conscious control, over your own being, and understanding your being, and understanding the being of others. And we'll get into this in 2 weeks when we talk about the temperaments, because your temperaments are determined by the way you're configured between your physical body, your etheric body, your astral body, and yourself. That determines the personality that you have. we're really built up out of the elements of solid, liquid, gas, and fire. And so we'll be talking about the four temperaments, the melancholic, the choleric, the sanguine, and the phlegmatic. Thank you. When you start to work to cultivate an environment in which Kundalini can be safe and sound activated, really everything has to come into play. And so that's why in the spiritual boot camp we look at gestures of the physical body. We look at the pranayamas, working with the gases in the body. We work with the ether. We work with the warmth of consciousness. It all really is about creating an environment in which metamorphosis can take place, because it's all about metamorphosis, and that's why tonight's talk is called Kundalini, the key to metamorphosis. It's not just about healing. It's about evolutionary metamorphosis. And we have evolved to this state of being really without having been involved at all. Right? Like, how'd you get to be so great and beautiful and complex in that? You really weren't involved in that. It was nature. It was nature. The cosmos, with its planetary influences, and Mother Nature working together to create us as physical, etheric, astral beings with a self. But from here on in, we need to plug in, we need to gear in to the will of the universe, which is this Kundalini force that lies dormant within the will of our being. So you have your Kundalini activated, your pineal gland operative. What do we do? Where do we go from there? And this is the most magnificent part of it all. It's this middle region of the heart that is to be developed in consciousness. That the will of the universe has helped us to develop the intelligence and the higher intelligence to then create ourselves as heart beings with the capacity to love. Why? Because the essence of the universe is love. I know that may sound very poetic and flaky even to the scientific mind, but that has been the perception and the belief of all of our ancestors throughout all time, history, all civilizations, cultures, up until about the last 5 minutes, relatively speaking, when, good old Descartes and, the rationalists of the age of enlightenment came in and really started chopping things down, and love somehow just fell through the cracks. Love was sort of like, oh, well, that's the soft and fluffy stuff. We're here to understand how matter works, how it exists. But the purpose of all of that, when you put it back together, is this middle realm in which is the heart, the feeling, and where the blood is circulated from, with that warmth that allows you to be an incarnated being. So, yes, this image of the two intertwined serpents, which are both going up, but more and more, as we get away from kind of the guru-guided path, where the guru guided your Kundalini up, and he actually brought the wisdom down, we need to realize that it's a two-way street. That, yes, something is brought up, but something is brought down. And in terms of the nadis in the yogic tantric system, the nadis are these energetic pathways that run up the left and the right side of the body that are the bookends for the central channel called the Sushumna, which is where the main flow of energy is. But this energy spirals up and down with these two nadis, the Ida and the Pingala, the left and the right, the masculine and the feminine, the solar and the lunar. And there's a moving up and there's a moving down. And that's an important concept to get clear in modern initiation, that it's not just about pushing things up, because that could lead to being ungrounded. The Shakti energy that is brought up from the earth is very powerful. It's referred to as the dragon energy. And I want to do just a little exercise around that, which is can be quite powerful if you take it up on your own at home. And it's about putting your awareness down at that tailbone and the area of the coccygeal gland, which is just underneath the tailbone. And yeah, the tailbone is vestigial. We don't have tails anymore. But in the counter space, in the ethereal space, there is still an organ that's there. There's a power there. And so what I want you to do is to imagine you have a tail. So from your third eye, looking down, imagine that there is something that drops down from that area of the coccyx. Feel that tail. Is it straight? Is it curled? Is it to the left? Is it to the right? We're in ethereal space, so there's a fluidity there. You're reaching down into the area of the dragon. We should talk about the chakras a little bit, because that is really very central to the work with Kundalini. We can think of this highway of the Sushumna, the central thread. It's a straight line. And of course, the serpent power might want to just go straight up from the Kunda gland, the coccygeal gland, up to the pineal gland and awaken. But that could be very dangerous, and that's actually the opposite of what we want to be doing. There's something that Rudolf Steiner refers to as reverse Kundalini, and how at this point in evolution we need to be moving from above, below, to just go straight up without the guidance of a guru. You might run into what I did when I turned 20 and I was like super keen to be a spiritual giant and got very enthusiastic about doing different exercises, learning things in books without any preparation, without any guide, without any reference points around what I was doing. And I awakened my Kundalini, as I mentioned, partly through this encounter with a guru for just an evening. He wasn't my guru, it was just an evening encounter to receive Shaktipat. And my Kundalini went up and took me into realms of higher consciousness that I don't think I've ever experienced since then. I was completely lit up inside, A, through inappropriate activation, and B, that there was oppositional forces that were only too happy to give me a premature awakening and to lift me up into what you could call Luciferic heights. Because there are forces that will trick and deceive into premature activation to over-accelerate the development. And so I bypassed all my chakras in doing that. I went straight to the third eye and then out the top through my crown. And so similar to what Kevin was saying, I had a prolonged experience of delusions of grandeur, and thinking I had achieved my goal of becoming, some sort of spiritual giant, Superman. But because I went on a straight line up, I had a straight plummet back down. And yeah, it was actually affected me for several years. Because it's not meant to go on a straight line, right? There's the pull that takes us on the detours that we need to take, and that's the chakras. It's a journey through the chakras, which are these spiraling, spinning, spiritual organs that need to be engaged, and they will be engaged by the Kundalini. The Kundalini is meant to turn them on. So in doing an activation of the chakras, it's really more of a coming down from the top and moving to the lower chakras, moving into this power of the dragon. And I wanted to just do a little section here called Kundalini Caught Under a Spell. That this serpent-like energy can actually be put under a spell. And there are forces actively looking at how to get a hold of our will and to possess and mess us. Right? Shouldn't be a surprise to you if you're on the spiritual path. To be aware that there are things that will want to take a hold of your will. It's one thing to get a hold of someone's mind and try and put thoughts into someone's minds, thought viruses, to sway someone's attitudes. That can have a certain influence. It's something else to pull on someone's feelings, to sway them emotionally. And that can have an influence. But when you've got someone's will, then you really got them. Because you got them at that place of action. And you could see that, this is all part of the Maya. The Maya is the Hindu idea of the world as a place of deception and illusion and trickery and seduction. To test us. This is a testing hologram that we're in, to test us how much we've got it together, how much we're balanced and aligned, and have our wits about us when things come along to seduce and test and trick. And you see it very clearly in media, in the world of advertising and marketing. They not only want to get their product in your face, in your eyes, and get you thinking about their product with their little ditties on the radio and so on, but they want to get to your feelings, right? They want it, oh yeah, this is a great product, I really want it, I need it, yeah, I need their product. You feel it. But furthermore, they want your will. They want you to take your hand and reach into your pocket and pull out your wallet and give them your money. Give them your Kundalini, right? Give you the Kundalini that's in your bank account. Because they know you're a millionaire and they want to tap into that. So, yeah, this Kundalini can be put under a spell, and there's all sorts of things. I want to look at, there's different lights out there. There's what can be known as luciferic lights, and this is what Andrew Camargo will be talking about on June 15th. The luciferic influence and Christic influence and the Ahrimanic influence. If you don't know what those words mean, don't worry, come to the talk. But there's false lights that try to draw us out of alignment, that we're not going to the true light. And one of those things is the technology we have in our times, particularly the internet. The internet is full of all sorts of things. And I'm going to be doing a talk on this in the fall about the sub-forces behind technology. But to get right to the point, things like the porn that is on the internet has a particularly strong force, a light that draws upon this Kundalini, this sexually based force. Because we have the sexual force, we need this sexual force, and that's what got us here. And so there can be false lights out there, such as through internet porn, and I don't want to get into a debate on the pros and cons of porn. There's porn, and then there's erotica. You know, there is a place for erotica. And we get into that in our spiritual boot camp. We're writing erotic scenarios to activate in a healthy way these soul forces, and to employ them, and then to transmute them. Because in Tantra, it's about activating sexual energies and then having the power to transmute them and use them in a different way, or to use them in lovemaking and even producing offspring, if you so choose. But there's something very pernicious about things like internet porn that will put the Kundalini under a spell. It'll put that powerful force under a spell. And I have a men's circle that I have here every 3 weeks, and some of you guys come to it. And just last week we had an evening called Another Evening of Porn. I don't think anybody came for porn. It was discussion around porn. And it's a serious issue, and it really ties into Kundalini being put under a spell, that there are men, a lot of men, addicted to it. They've geared into this form of light, and it activates them, and they give over hours of their time and energy to just being mesmerized by it. Because it is quite dazzling. The technology is dazzling, the colored images are dazzling, the bare breasts are dazzling, like it's all just so incredible. And I know it's the same thing for women too. There's a side there where women are also subject to this seduction. Brings me to my next huge piece, which this huge piece in this tiny little booklet, a lecture that Rudolf Steiner gave a few years ago. And Rudolf Steiner, he's considered by some one of the greatest modern initiates of our time, bringing ancient wisdom into the modern period and illuminating new light onto it. And this little booklet called The Etherization of the Blood is really what it's all about. This is the biggest piece of the night. What is etherization of your blood about? Well, if you think about it, the ethers of the universe brought us through this snake period, developing the will, and then developing the brain and the intelligence, so that at the middle of it we could develop our own heart. So everything is developed and shaped out of these ethers. And I'll just read a quote from Rudolf Steiner. He says, "When clairvoyantly you see the blood pulsating through the human body, you also see how the blood becomes thin in the heart, dissolving into its finest physical parts and returning to its etheric form. As the blood took gradually form in the ether, so in the present human body we have the process reversed. The blood returns to its etheric form. Etheric streams are continually passing outwards from the heart, so that we see the etheric body being reformed all along the course of the blood." What is he saying there? That the ethers of the universe streamed in from the periphery to create you as the center. And at the center of centers is the heart. And still, with every heartbeat and every breath, the ethers are streaming into you and stream through your bloodstream, maintaining you as an etheric being, and at the same time there is a re-etherization taking place where from your center the ethers are being generated and sent out. What does that mean? What does that mean in the long term? It means through our heart, forces of our heart, and our heart is actually made up of voluntary muscles, which seems kind of weird. Like, why is the heart made up of striated muscles the same as voluntary muscles? It doesn't seem like it's a voluntary muscle. From the time we're born to the time we die, it's just doing its own thing 24/7, even when you're asleep. It doesn't seem like you're ever having to exercise it as a muscle. But Rudolf Steiner says that it is the organ of the future that we will gradually gain more and more control over in this process of etherization of the blood, where the ether that streams in streams out. What does that mean? It means that we have the capacity to re-spiritualize matter. This is not the end of the road, having this physical body. This is midstream. We weren't physical beings to begin with. We came through a long process of evolution, beginning with warmth, then gas, liquid, and finally into a crystalline form. Right? Guided by the planets in our solar system. Some of them are solid, some of them are liquid, some of them are gas, and some of them are thermal. They're in those states, and we've gone through those different states to arrive at this place of being crystalline, and through learning how, from the heart, to etherize the blood, we now take up the reins of evolution in the re-spiritualization of matter, the sacralization of matter, to make matter sacred, and to return to a spiritual form, but with one great difference. We have developed consciousness. We have developed ourselves as awake, conscious beings that are partnering with the universe. We are acting as the will of the universe. We are acting as the intelligence of the universe. And we are living the heart and love of the universe. Because each of us is a microcosm of the universe. To get there, I'm going to read this little section from the Bible, if you don't mind. Nobody's going to be too offended by that. I know, like whipping out a Bible these days is sort of like, oh my gosh, it's got a Bible. And you can take it any way you want, because, you know, whether you want to accept the contents of the Bible as being factual and historical, or whether they're just stories. It doesn't matter whether it's, you know, a story like Isis and Osiris or Goldilocks and the Three Bears. There can still be truth and spiritual principles that are being illuminated through the story. But this is a story from the Gospels. There was a man named Nicodemus who came to Jesus by night and said unto him, "We know thou art a teacher from God, for no man can do these things except God be with him." Jesus answered and said unto him, "Except a person be born again, they cannot see the kingdom of God." Nicodemus asked, "How can a person be born again when old? Can they enter a second time into the mother's womb and be born?" Jesus answered, "Except a person be born of water and of spirit, they cannot enter into the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I said unto thee, ye must be born again. The wind blows where it goes, and you hear the sound, but cannot tell where it comes from and where it goes. It is the same with everyone that is born of the Spirit. Nicodemus said, how can these things be? Jesus answered, art thou not a master of Israel, and know not these things? As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so the Son of Man must be lifted up. And whosoever receives this will attain eternal life, a new life. Elsewhere in another gospel, Jesus says the same words. Just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up. These parables, these stories are all coded information, esoteric imagery speaking of spiritual truths. This reference to lifting up the serpent in the wilderness, which Moses did, it is going back to a story in the Old Testament. This one was obviously from the New Testament. This is from the Old Testament, or what the people of Jewish orientation call the Torah. And this was a story where the children of Israel were out in the wilderness, and there was venomous snakes around attacking them because they were out of alignment. They were out of alignment spiritually and basically in a state of sin. I know sin's not really a popular word these days. The New Age movement kind of got rid of sin. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as mistakes. There's no such thing as good or bad. But in fact, that's Luciferian light. That's false light. That's a false doctrine when people tell you there's no such thing as a flawed action or a flawed behavior or being out of alignment. Because the word sin actually means to miss the mark. And to miss the mark isn't necessarily like trying to hit a target that way. It's to miss the mark this way, in your vertical alignment with spirit, where you miss the mark in bringing down the right goods. Mm-hmm. You followed a false light. You didn't follow the true light. You got seduced by Maya. And in your actions, you missed the mark. And so when you're out of alignment, you're basically in what the Bible refers to as a state of sin. And in this case, all these venomous snakes were attacking them, and people were dying as a result. And so when the people came to Moses, they said, we sinned when we spoke against the Lord and against you. Pray that the Lord will take the snakes away from us. So Moses prayed for the people, and the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and it shall come to pass that everyone who is bitten, when they look upon it, will be saved. So Moses made the bronze serpent and set it on a pole, and it came to pass that if a serpent bit anyone, when they looked upon the bronze serpent, they lived. And this story is the origin of, or at least references this image of the serpent being put up on this pole and helping people to get back in alignment, which is to be saved. To be saved is to be put back into alignment and continue with the healing. And the ultimate healing is this process of ascension, spiritual ascension. So when we talk about Kundalini as the key to metamorphosis, we're really talking about being born again, about shedding the old nature, the snakeskin of our former nature here as Homo sapiens, and ascending in an aligned way by working with the chakras, these spiraling organs that they become formed and whole and cleansed and developed, and ascending into this Homo Angelicus, this higher nature. And it's interesting how Jesus said we need to be born of water and of spirit. Because we're all born of water the first time, right? When we're in the mother's womb, we're in the embryonic sac, we're born of water. Just like the serpents, they came out of water. When you conceive a child and it's carried in the womb, it's like in that serpent state that is evolving in the womb. And then the water breaks. Mama's water breaks. And you're born the first time. But that's given by nature. To be born again is something that you have to do. Where you have to employ your free will. You have to engage free will power to take yourself through a spiritual initiation. And we saw how the initiation of this new age of really being able to be born again into a higher new nature began with, or at least had a step forward with, that whole thing around John the Baptist. John the Baptizer, who was taking people down into water in the River Jordan, symbolic of them being cleansed, and then lifting them up back into verticality in preparation to receive the descent of the new nature. And then, of course, at that time, while John the Baptizer was doing this, along came Jesus, and he stepped into that ritual as well. He was baptized by John the Baptist, went down into the water, came up into verticality, and then descended what was symbolized as the dove, or the Holy Spirit, the new nature. The Holy Spirit really referring to the next level nature that we're all moving towards. And yeah, I sometimes think that would be kind of interesting to bring that ritual back. I would like to be baptized in water as a symbol of cleansing, of letting go of the old, letting go of all the junk from the past, symbolically, and saying, yes, I am cleansing the vessel to receive the descent of Shiva. Shakti has come up and the Shiva comes down, the higher consciousness of Shiva. I don't know if people would really get into that.
Sorry.
But yes. Oh, you like to be baptized?
Yes.
Yeah, I enjoy cold showers, yeah.
Good.
But I was going to say that in Orthodoxy, there's a Thursday, it's called Clean Thursday. So every once a year, like somewhere close to Easter, it's encouraged before the sunrise to go on to the shower and to cleanse before, like, yourself. It's kind of annual ritual. Since you're on topic of.
Yeah, it's great. The orthodoxy, as you call it, still maintains some of these old rituals. Of course, a lot of people aren't really flocking to those these days. There are still people that appreciate that, but there's no reason why we can't reinvent them and tailor them to our own way of being. I like to call it, rather than being baptized, it really is more to the point, having a personal Pentecost. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody. Pentecost is also referring to a biblical scenario which took place after the Jesus the Christ had been crucified and went through the 3 days, 3 nights in the sarcophagus, the temple initiation, and then reappeared alive in a new form, in the new nature. He was born again, and then this ascension that took place, and after that was Pentecost. Pentecost was 50 days after the ascension, And the students that he had taught were all assembled together in the temple. And there was the sound of wind that came and filled the temple. And it says that a flame alighted on each one of them. A flame from above alighted upon each of them. And I have this book here, The Imagination of Pentecost, which is really about a personal Pentecost where we learn in our own process of self-initiation to bring down that higher consciousness, the new nature, and integrate it into what has been ascending through time, through the mineral, plant, animal kingdoms, and how that marriage within the heart, so we can etherize the blood and re-spiritualize all matter and create that kingdom of God that Jesus was talking about, that we may live not in a world like this, which we're treating like a trash bin, but that we are going to create that kingdom, that spiritual world, through our heart forces. When we use the voluntary muscles, we get mastery over that. So big, so big. So I kind of make an equation between Kundalini and the cosmic or Christ consciousness. Call it the Kundalini cosmic Christ impulse, which enables us to go from the horizontal, right, like a snake, come into the vertical and bring down the goods from above and integrate it, and then transform the world, re-etherize the world. I can tell from the silence of the room you're all gobsmacked. Either that or getting sleepy.
Unpacking wonderful knowledge.
Yes. Oh, and yes, that Kundalini cosmic Christ consciousness, what has it? It's been with us all along. And Steiner points out that it is the thing that has taken things from the horizontal to the vertical. It's the thing that informs plants coming up as the sense organs of the planet, connecting the gap between Earth and the heavens. It's the thing that has evolved animals into humans. And it's the force that allows a baby in the first 3 years to go from this crawling creature to standing up. He says it's all the same force. Whatever you want to call it. And it's sitting in you. It's an artist in residence in you. Like money in the bank. As a millionaire waiting for you to spend it and expend it. So, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight, giving up your valuable time to hear about this theme. And I hope you'll take it home and ponder it, because I do obviously feel this is an important subject. I've done 3 nights on it.
Is it going to be a fourth?
No, it's not going to be 4th. But it'll tie into the other things.
Sounds done.
And when you've begun to work with it, I hope you'll take it to the streets and share it with others as a key to the metamorphosis that we're waiting for. We're not waiting for the government, we're not waiting for the Illuminati, we're not waiting for angels, aliens, animals, elementals, none of those. It's you, 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 and me that are the ones that hold the key. And I look forward to working with you if the grace of the heavens allows that, to work in partnership around this, moving forward into a glorious future of bringing the cosmos into the earth and transforming it. So, namaste.
Let's take it to the streets.
Take it to the streets.
Take it to the streets. The Kundalini beat.